Hey, welcome to Pretty Well. Do you want to get to the root causes of your health concerns? Do you find yourself Googling, why do I feel this way? And looking for solutions to feel great again? I'm Lisa Smith, and I too felt exhausted, achy, and like I was aging too quickly. I wanted to look and feel like myself again, and spent way too much time and money going to practitioners, even functional medicine practitioners, and not getting results. So I became a functional medicine practitioner myself and learned how to identify and fix root causes to health issues. The good news is there is so much you can do to reclaim your wellness. In this podcast, you'll find quick, simple, and evidence-based guidance that you can easily fit into your day so your energy will be soaring, your mind clear, and your skin will return to its beautiful glow. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Vitality Radio. I'm your host each and every week, twice a week. My name is Jared St. Clair, and of course, Vitality Radio is the podcast where we help you master natural supplements, enhance your emotional vitality, and thrive without the use of pharma drugs. Now, one of the things that I love to do on Vitality Radio podcast, or I guess I should say because of Vitality Radio podcast, is appear on other people's podcasts. And then oftentimes when that happens, I end up thinking, wow, that person would be a great guest on my podcast. And that's what happened today. We're going to talk with an expert on something that I bet a lot of people listening today have never even heard of. It's called the estrobolome. And we'll talk about what that is and how it impacts your hormone balance. We're going to focus primarily on what's going on with women with this, although this also applies to men. And we're going to get into how the gut plays a vital role in proper hormone metabolism, hormone production, and everything in between. And we're doing that with my next guest, whose name is Lisa Smith. Now, I was on Lisa's podcast. Well, we recorded an episode maybe a month or so ago, but it's not going to release here for several months. And after the recording, it was pretty obvious that not only was she going to be a great guest on Vitality Radio, but that we could actually be great friends. We had a nice conversation afterwards. And so super excited to introduce you to her to you. Lisa is a functional medicine dietitian, a gut health expert, and the founder of Lisa Smith Wellness. With dual master's degrees in nutrition and human biology, Lisa is passionate about helping individuals live their most vibrant lives by sharing evidence-based and cutting-edge health solutions through a personalized lens. She has her own podcast, as I mentioned, which I've already been a guest on, but officially you'll be able to hear it in the spring. And that's called the Pretty Well podcast. And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Lisa Smith to Vitality Radio. Lisa, thanks for joining me.
Jared, thanks for having me on. We get to continue the conversation. We have so much in common, and you're right. I'm happy to have made your friendship. I think we always have lots to talk about.
Indeed, for sure. Yeah, this is going to be easy. We have a limited amount of time because we try and always keep these shows under an hour. I think we could talk for 5 hours about this topic. So we probably should dig into it here in a second. But I do want you to tell my listeners how is it? This is the question I have, which I've not asked you. Dietitians in America, as a general rule, in my experience, correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, are pretty just kind of by the book. What they learned in school, they teach to people. I've found that there's not a lot of, I don't know what the right word is, maybe alternative thinking or functional medicine type thinking when it comes to dietitians in America. But you, as I've talked to you and been interviewed by you, seem to be taking it to a very different level than what I typically am used to. Explain that to us.
I'm happy to. And, I never saw myself becoming a dietitian. Back in the day, I went back to school. You know this, Jared, but for our listeners, in the past year and a half, I've relocated from Pennsylvania to South Carolina. Really good move in the winter. Like, it's big change.
No doubt.
Yes. But in Pennsylvania, I had a fantastic brick and mortar practice called Integrative Wellness Center. It was my clinic. I was the founder, and it was my passion. It was my dream. And before I opened it, I went back to grad school. As you said, I'm a nerd and a perpetual student. And I thought, I'm just going to get my master's in nutrition, then I'm going to hang out a shingle and open an office. So I was almost done with my master's in nutrition and realized, oh man, I need to know like where food meets physiology. All my electives are these higher level human biology courses. I'm just going to get a master's in biology while I'm at it. So I tacked that on. I was like, I'm ready to go. And then I thought, wait a minute, when you go to get your taxes done, if you have some really or you have estate planning, you don't just go to someone with a master's in accounting, you go to somebody who literally has some kind of special other certification. And I was like, what do I need to do? So I reached out to a mentor. I was like, I'm going to do this online thing. Would you just be give me a reference? And she said, you need to become a dietitian. And I was like, no, I don't. No, I don't need to do that. And she talked me into it. And so then I went down that path as well. And here's why. This is the cool thing. So in the world of dietitians, much like in the world of physicians and medical healthcare providers, we see two avenues. We see the traditional avenue. Along dietitians, the lion's share are in the traditional avenue. And you're right. They're the ones, if someone's in the hospital with a cardiac situation, they're the ones saying, or, high cholesterol or whatever, oh, you need to be having the diet jello and the diet soda. And to me, that was like, what are you telling people? Then there's the other vein, the other avenue. And those are dietitians for integrative and functional medicine. There's actually a division of us under this umbrella. And we're completely opposite, right? We are what you said. We are functional medicine, root cause resolution minded, holistic health. The body is whole.
Yeah.
We don't do artificial sweeteners or artificial anything. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's kind of like when someone in traditional medicine finds functional medicine and they go, what? Like the lights have been turned on. We can
Right.
help
Yeah.
people get better. So that's my
Okay.
backstory.
Well, you got exactly what I was getting at because and honestly, when you first told me you were a dietitian, we didn't talk about this, but you told me you were a dietitian. I was like, not like the ones I know. A little bit different kind of dietitian.
No,
But it's
no.
funny because I don't have anything after my name. I don't even have Junior. It's just Jared St. Clair, right? I dropped out of college, so I'm quite the opposite of you. Although I think I am just as big of a nerd. I just didn't do it the formal way. I've been learning on my own all these years. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing is I get called Dr. Jared a lot. People call me
Mm,
that because, they think I'm, I don't know, smart or whatever it is. And
mm.
I'm
You
like,
are.
wait a minute, bite your tongue. I don't know if I want to be lumped in with those guys, but there are some great doctors out there in the functional medicine world primarily. And I suppose there are great dietitians out there too. I just wasn't aware of them until I met you.
Yeah.
Super excited to hear that there are people in the dietitian world that are doing it right. Cause honestly, I didn't know that existed. So very, very cool.
Yes. I think of us as the black hats under the umbrella.
For
We're the
sure.
ones who are like bucking the system and swimming upstream. But back to what you were saying, you have many degrees. They were self-created, but you've got so much learning. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Hmm.
I know a few things. Always
You sure
learning though.
do.
As
Yeah.
we talked, prior to hitting record, I told you that one of the things I'm very excited about today is, I've done so much of this. This has got to be something like my 1600th show or something like that. And I've
Amazing.
done, yeah, and not including ones I've been on as a guest, but just as a host. And doing as many as I have and talking about supplements as much as I do and health and nutrition and all that kind of stuff, oftentimes the topic at hand is something that I'm pretty, well educated on and feel like I've got a pretty good idea how the answers are going to come from my guest.
Yeah.
Today, the estrobolome is something I mentioned right at the beginning, and we better jump into what it is. That it's
Yeah.
something that I think most people probably haven't heard of. I would anticipate the bulk of people listening to this show are like, estrobolome, what the heck is
Mhm.
that? And it's something that my wife and I have been digging into as we've been writing our book for our endocrine detoxification protocol. So when you interviewed me a month or so ago and we talked about what we were doing and you talked about the estrobolome, I was like, well, not only is Lisa awesome, but that's a great topic for Vitality Radio. So we got to do this.
Awesome.
So tell us that are uninformed, what the heck is the estrobolome?
Well, I mean, who would know, right? When I first learned about this, I was mind blowing and I was so excited because it explains A lot. So the estrobolome is this. So we know our microbiome, right? We all know that the microbiome, we have different microbiomes in our body and on our body.
Hmm.
But when we refer to the microbiome in general, we're usually talking about the gut. There's the
Right.
skin, there's the mouth, there's the nose, there's all the other places. But we're normally referring to the gut. And in that microbiome, and for our listeners, I know that they're really well versed in holistic health, but just to put it in a picture, that's like an ecosystem. If you ever see those terrains,
Hmm.
at a pet store or something, and everything's self-contained and they're all symbiotic and living together. You've got critters and you've got plants and you've got all these other things. That's kind of like our microbiome. Within the microbiome, there's a subsection called the estrobolome. And that is this group of bacteria that actually regulate our estrogen. So we tend to think of our hormones impacting our gut health. We tend to think of estrogen, certain hormones increase intestinal mobility. Certain hormones, if they're too high, might increase leaky gut, which we can talk about in a little more detail. But actually, it's bidirectional. It goes both ways. So it's not just that our hormones influence our gut. Our gut, and right now what we're talking about, the estrobolome, influences our estrogen. And let's talk about how does it do that. So our estrogen goes through through our body. Our body uses it, and when our body goes to eliminate it, it goes through the GI tract, and as it to be eliminated in the toilet. So I like to think of it as it gets packaged up onto a garbage truck. So if you picture your estrogen, your body's used what it needs, and it's like, okay, the rest of it's garbage. It goes out in the trash on the garbage truck. So it's getting packaged in your GI tract. And there is an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase.
Hmm.
When our estrobolome is not, when we have dysbiosis, just a fancy word meaning our microbiome is off. It has too many of the bad guys, not enough of the good guys. The balance is off, so it's not working well. That's when we have, traditional gut health issues. So when that's off, then the estrobolome is off. When the estrobolome is off, it's hiking up the production of this beta-glucuronidase, this enzyme. All you need to know is beta-glucuronidase is the guy who kicks the estrogen off of the garbage truck. So it's in the garbage truck package, ready to go out. Beta-glucuronidase comes and cleaves it off, says nope, pushes it off the garbage truck, and it recycles back through our body. That's when we end up with things like estrogen dominance symptoms. So we tend to think that is an organ problem. That's an ovary problem. That's a hormone
Yes.
and glandular problem. Not necessarily. Sometimes it's a gut problem. So if we're doing all the things to balance our hormones and we're still suffering, PCOS is a perfect example. When someone's suffering from polycystic ovarian syndrome, that often is related to estrogen dominance. We have to look at the gut, the role of the gut in that. And in all hormone imbalance, we have to look at the gut.
Well, I love the analogy of kicking the estrogen off of the garbage truck. And B, it's so vital that we all always, I think back to the gut when we think of root cause for anything. Now, you said something that I think is really, really important because everything in the human body is complex, right? There's no real simple thing that you can tie every specific symptom to. However, one thing that I think we can agree on is that the gut plays a role in all of it, right? It may not be the primary factor in what's going on with your hormones. It may
Mhm.
not be the only factor. It's certainly not the only factor, but it is a factor pretty much all the time. Well, one way or the other, right? Either for good or for bad, depending on what level of dysbiosis we might have.
Mhm.
And there was a years ago, I like to tell this story because it's something that I think hopefully locks this concept into people's heads. My buddy Will is my best friend since the seventh grade. He helped manage my store for about 10 years, 20 years ago. And now he's the CEO over at Ridgecrest Herbals. And he and I have been best friends for, well, I don't know, 40 years now, 41. Oh my gosh.
Mm.
Anyway, so we worked together for 10 years and there was this brand that came on the market. It's still out on the market. It's called Nature's Secret. And Nature's Secret, the brand, was all about intestinal cleansing and intestinal health, basically. So they had probiotics and digestive enzymes and colon cleanses and things like that. And they never said this, but Will and I were talking one day and we were like, man, did they not just name their company perfectly? Because nature's secret is what's going on in the gut impacts everything else in the body, right? It's digestion and elimination and how that works. That is really it. So when we think
Mhm.
about the whatever it is, your thyroid, your adrenal glands, your ovaries, your testes, and everything else, we can't ever forget the gut. The gut is just such a massive player in that. And I was actually interviewing another guy, a good friend of mine, Max Willis from Solare, maybe 5, 6 years ago. And he was so excited to share with my listeners that he had just discovered 2 probiotics that played a very specific role in the increasing production of testosterone.
Oh,
And yeah, so the research is getting to the point where we now know specifically what species play a role in hormone production, hormone regulation, and balance, and everything else. So I think you're dead on when you talk about the critical nature of how all of this works. Now, I have a question you might not have seen coming, but I'm really curious
okay.
your opinion on this. So my wife, who all of
Mhm.
my listeners know well. She's been on the show many times, and I talk about her constantly, the poor thing. But she was no longer has a gallbladder. I say it was taken from her years ago when she didn't know any better. And
Mm, mhm.
she doesn't have a gallbladder, and she's in this, these menopausal years where she's dealing with those things, and we're, working with hormone balance and detoxification and all this kind of stuff. And as we were researching the estrobolome and we were researching what her what would be the very best way to balance her body specifically, we were reading about exactly what you said, this whole packaging up of the estrogen and throwing it on the garbage truck. And that happens when bile grabs a hold of the estrogen. And of course, bile is stored in the gallbladder unless you don't
Mhm.
have one. And then we're getting these, kind of this slow drip of bile instead of the level of production that we need. So my question
Mhm.
for you, and I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, I'm digging into it myself right now, is how big of a deal do you think it is for those of us that do not have a gallbladder in terms of creating a bigger issue for the estrobolome and this beta-glucuronidase? Is it a bigger deal for people without a gallbladder than with?
That's not something I've ever looked into, but, just off the cuff, we know you're going to be saying amen to this. We know how incredible the human body is, and there's
Hmm.
so many compensatory mechanisms. So if something isn't working properly or we no longer have it, it's incredible that the body goes, "Oh, I can pick up the slack there. I'll do this." I would say for your wife's benefit and anyone without a gallbladder, then it becomes important to be more intentional on helping to keep that, helping to support the liver in the bile production. So then we're looking at things like TUDCA,
Hmm.
TUDCA, right? And that is a really long name that I don't even know how to say. You
That's why they
probably
call it
do.
TUDCA.
Yeah, exactly. It stands for something really long. But TUDCA is amazing for helping to, emulsify fats and keep the bile production. It's bitter. Anything that's bitter, our liver loves bitter things. So think dandelion greens, dandelion
Yep.
root, TUDCA. Another thing that I would tend toward, I'm a big believer in digestive enzymes. I would
Hmm.
look at those that with ox bile that help to support again the liver's production of bile and just the body's use of it. So I think it adds an additional challenge, but it's just something that then we look at and say, okay, how do we get around this, and what do we do to support the body
Yeah.
in addition to what it's doing?
Just requires a little more support, right? Yeah, that's the conclusion that we came to. I wasn't sure if you'd ever, specifically worked with that or not, but we have her using ox bile with each meal now, at least each meal that contains any fat, and we will be periodically, at least if not consistently, she's going to experiment with TUDCA and TUDCA versus ox bile, and kind of seeing how that works. But this is an important thing because you talked about the estrogen garbage truck essentially, and you talked about cleaving off the estrogen with this beta-glucuronidase. So
Mhm.
this is an enzyme that's created when there's dysbiosis in the gut, right? And it's
Mhm.
created at higher levels when there's dysbiosis. And so the
Right.
garbage men are trying to do their job, but somebody keeps grabbing the bags and throwing them and throwing them off the truck, right? And
Exactly.
so
Mhm.
what do we do about that? Because I think you're going to say there's two or three things that need to be considered, but what's your opinion about how we prevent that from happening and keep those garbage bags of estrogen, that spent estrogen and these toxins going out to the trash?
Yeah, so I like a multi-pronged approach. Being somebody who is a food lover, food to me is the cornerstone of all the things, and I'm always looking at food is either our best medicine or our worst poison, right? And so let's look at from a food standpoint first of all, and then let's talk supplements, and then I'm gonna turn to you because you are the supplement expert and say what else do you have? But from a food standpoint, we want to do two things. We want to increase our fiber intake because fiber does a whole bunch of things. It's insane what fiber does. But one, it's like a mop. It mops up toxins. It helps to
Hmm.
grab a hold of them like a magnet and pull them out of the body. So, and it keeps us regular, which that's a two-pronged thing that it's doing to help
Sure.
detoxify us. In addition to that, fiber helps us make short chain fatty acids, right? Butyrate and all of those, which reduces inflammation. Once we reduce inflammation, everything's working. The whole machine's working better. So fiber does that as well. And it fills us up. So we're less likely, it reduces cravings. We're less likely to reach for ultra processed foods. So that's the first thing I would look at. That, and when I don't want to shortchange us on the short chain, talk about a tongue twister, shortchange us on the short chain fatty acid uh, conversation because that we tend to underestimate it, and I'm guilty of that too. How important those short chain fatty acids are. There's something we hear kind of in the periphery, and we go, "Oh yeah, I think I've heard that before." That I think that is important, but like I don't know. I think I'm okay without it. Well, it's really, really important. So just being mindful that your diet can impact this thing that absolutely reduces inflammation. So we want to reduce things that cause inflammation and we want to increase things that lower inflammation. And fiber is a superstar for that. The second dietary piece that's really important are cruciferous vegetables because what they've found is that sulforaphane, which is the active ingredient primarily in broccoli sprouts, but that is the key for reducing beta-glucuronidase. Remember that thing that kicks the estrogen off of the garbage truck. Sulforaphane, that active ingredient in broccoli sprouts, helps to very powerfully helps to reduce that. So any kind of cruciferous vegetables also have an impact. That's just the most potent piece of it. But anytime we're getting those cruciferous vegetables in, the broccoli, the cauliflower, kale, asparagus, rutabaga, any of those things that all have that, that cruciferous vegetable taste to it, that is helping to reduce that beta-glucuronidase and toxins in the body. So that's a dietary piece, a two-pronged dietary piece. Then from a supplement standpoint, I mentioned sulforaphane.
Hmm.
And, we see a lot of different estrogen cleanse types of products that have really active ingredients that help bring down that beta glucuronidase. So that's important as well. Then we could always talk lifestyle, right? We could talk exercise, hydration,
Sure.
all the things that keep things moving and keep them moving out of our body. So
Well,
that's my start to that.
I love it. And I love that, one of the things that I try to emphasize on Vitality Radio, maybe I don't do it as much as I should even, as a guy who people look to for supplement advice, I tend to focus heavily on supplementation on the
Hmm.
show. And I love supplementation and I'm a avid supplement user myself,
Me
but
too.
there's so many things that can be taken care of in diet or at least assisted, right? So if you look at it, I
Yep.
love that approach. And of course, as a dietitian, or at least a good dietitian, you would be pointing at food, which I love because food plus other lifestyle factors plus supplements is where supplementation really shines when you're already doing some of those other things that are so foundational, right? It's like you can do whatever you want for stress, but if you don't get good sleep, good luck, right? And the same thing
Exactly.
could be said when we're talking about detoxification and all this kind of stuff. So I love that answer. And one other thing to point at with the fiber that you already mentioned, and you mentioned all these, kind of a little bit of a checklist of what fiber does. It's also, most fibers are great prebiotics as well. So they're supportive
Yes.
of the estrobolome and the entire microbiome. So there's no downside to that, right? So love,
Right.
love, love that answer. Fantastic. What are your thoughts on calcium D-glucarate for this specific purpose?
Oh,
Because it's very
excellent.
directly involved in this.
It's excellent. Yeah, calcium D-glucarate is also excellent. That would be one other player. I'm like I'm going down this food and sulforaphane, but definitely that is a supplement that is included in those estrogen cleanse types of products. At least you want it included. And talk to me about what you have found with that as you've done
Well,
your research.
that's the interesting thing. So the coolest thing about being able to do what I do for a living, I guess, the combination of helping people one on one, which of course you've done a lot of that in the position that you've put yourself in. Then formulating supplements to help people with, and then educating on supplements, is I get to see it from a bunch of different angles, and I never cease to be amazed at what I don't know. I mean, there's just this
Mm,
massive
same.
volume of stuff to try and learn, right? And
Hmm.
it's Jen and I joke about it all the time. When we decided to come up with this endocrine detoxification protocol, that we were going to write a book about it, because we wanted people to have this, deeper level of support beyond what we could do with supplements. And within the book, of course, is education on the supplements and how they work and why they work and how to take them and all that stuff. But the vast majority of the book is just explaining how this all works, and then talking about the diet side of things and the lifestyle side of things and the things to avoid and the things to replace those things with and all that kind of thing. Well, we
Hmm.
thought it was going to be like this 20 or 30 page thing, kind of more of a pamphlet type of a thing. No, it's not. It's it's going to be like, it'll be 100+ pages. I
Oh
think it'll be even
man,
significantly more than that, it appears. And
awesome.
it's been this mixed bag, because it's a lot more work than we anticipated, but we have learned so much in the process. And one of the things that I learned in greater detail, because I kind of had a basic understanding of it, but I've always been a huge fan. I don't know if you noticed me give you the thumbs up when you said cruciferous vegetables. I've always been this huge believer in cruciferous vegetables from a dietary side, and then the key
Mhm.
compounds in cruciferous vegetables with indole 3 carbinol and
Yeah.
dim as these key elements that are key. What's the word I'm looking for? Nutrients,
Compound.
yeah,
Yeah.
compounds that are in these things specifically for metabolizing estrogens and helping the body to get rid of them, and specifically targeting these fake estrogens or xenoestrogens that we get from body care products and air pollution and a million other things. And
Mhm.
deglucarate was the one that I knew about, and I kind of had a general understanding of what it did, but I didn't have nearly the understanding that I've recently come across, I guess, as I've dug into it deeper. And as I really started understanding, and it had to do with writing the book, and then it had to do with also helping my wife with what she's dealing with and her lack of a gallbladder, and
Mhm.
recognizing that what she's been doing is she's been doing great work on her microbiome ever since I met her, because her microbiome was an absolute train wreck when we first met, based on
Mhm.
years and years and years of abuse of her microbiome through significant antibiotics as a child and all these other things. But I
Mhm.
hadn't tied together the gallbladder thing and the bile binding to the estrogens, and then this whole cleaving off thing that you talked about. None of, like, it was, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. I kind of understood it, but I hadn't focused on it, is probably the best way to
Mhm.
put it. And then as I started digging
Get
into it,
that.
it's like, oh my gosh, this is like a really, really vital aspect of this. And I had been really underselling the value of calcium deglucarate, particularly for people that struggle with liver function or gallbladder function or don't have a gallbladder, because if you're not if you don't have that on board, you're going to have a heck of a time getting all that stuff out of the body and not recycling it. So in our EndoCleanse formula, which I told you about, I think when we talked before, it's got
Mhm.
calcium D-glucarate in it, and it always made sense to put it in. But we're actually in the process right now of looking at it and saying, we might need to beef up that potency of the D-glucarate, particularly for people that are in the shoes that my wife is in. And, or if not, recommend a little bit of extra, because the more I read about it and the more I really understand that mechanism, I'm considering it way more vital than I used to.
Interesting. That's helpful for me to know. I know it's a key player, but what you said is so true. We all learn these things and we learn them in layers, like an
Yeah.
onion. And as we learn them, we're like, oh, yeah, that's kind of a big deal. And then we learn a little more, and we're like, well, that's a really big deal. And then we learn more, we're like, oh my gosh, how do we not know this? And then you just take off on it. That's even when I started learning about the estrobolome and its role. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is remarkable. Just like the same with calcium D-glucarate and the DIM and the ID, indole-free carbon. It's all fascinating, really. But even just to step back real quick to the prebiotics you mentioned for fiber,
Yeah.
just to drive that home for our listeners, the importance of prebiotics when we talk about the gut and the microbiome and dysbiosis. So when we picture the microbiome as like a good army and a bad army, the bad army isn't bad. It just needs to be kept in check it is bad, but if it's kept in check by the good army, that's the ecosystem. We're not looking to eliminate all this stuff. But what we want to do is feed that good army so that it always is the lion's share of what we've got going on in that
Right.
microbiome. And the way we feed it is with prebiotic fibers. And just as you said, we can take a supplement or we can be mindful of our diet and increase those fibers, and our gut loves it. And that brings down inflammation. Or we can do a combo. We can take some supplement and we can use our diet. We can customize it however works best. But I just didn't want to gloss over the importance of that either, because that when people are like, yeah, I know I need more fiber, I'm guilty. I do the same thing. And I'm like, no, actually, I really do need more fiber. It
Yeah.
actually is that important.
And the thing is, this is something I'll mention that I hadn't really thought about saying during this conversation, but I think it matters. I talk a lot about overwhelm that people experience. They hear podcasts like this and they're
Mm.
like, okay, so where do I start? Because they talked about this and they talked about that and they talked about this and that and all these other things. And one of
Yeah.
the things that I think discourages people with fiber is they'll read these studies where it says that, you need 25 grams or 35 grams or 40 grams of fiber. And they're looking at their diet and they're like, uh, I'm not very close to that, right? Like maybe
Yeah,
I'm
like,
getting 8 grams
how
or
am I going to
whatever
get
it
there?
is, right? Because the
Yeah.
average American diet is pretty devoid of fiber, right? And so
Yes.
people that are eating cleaner, healthier, more whole foods are certainly getting some, but oftentimes nowhere near some of these, sort of lofty goals that some of these writers and experts are talking about.
Mhm.
My belief is that more is better than what you're already doing. Right.
Yes.
And we have to
100%.
recognize that, it's the same thing I say when we talk about detoxifying your home environment. Just not lighting the scented candles anymore is a win.
Yes.
Unplugging the Glade plugins is a win.
Yes.
Changing your shampoo is a win. Any one of these individual things is still a win and moving you towards that. And one thing that's really interesting about prebiotic fiber is it didn't take 35 grams a day of fiber to influence the microbiome in a positive way. A few
Right.
extra grams make a significant difference in the microbiome. So don't think that you've got to master this fiber thing to the point where you're getting your full daily allotment right out of the gate. That's a pretty big change for a
Mhm.
lot of people. I dare say for most people, but
Mhm.
work towards that as the goal. Get your fiber content up 3 or 4 or 5 grams a day. Start there. That's great. That's progress, and it will make an impact. And then, move up from there.
I love that. And when we end, let's just give some, like, start here. Let's just give some points like, okay, we gave you a just overload of information. Just start here. That's
Yep.
why I always like to bring food in, because it's an easy place to start. So for prebiotic fibers, for our listeners, some great ways of getting them in: onions, leeks, garlic, asparagus, bananas, apples, kiwi. These are all things we can add every day. We don't have to add all of them, but just to your point, add some of that every day and your microbiome will thank you. And this is the really exciting thing. We don't feel it, but our microbiome begins to shift within 2 days.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's so doable then. It's very encouraging.
Agreed. And that's, yeah, why I brought up the whole overwhelmed people thing, because I think a lot of people, they do hear a show like this. they get excited about it, and then they look at all the changes that they need to make, and it's like, yeah, I'll start tomorrow, right? So just
Exactly.
make the
Yeah.
little change, make the little shift, add some of these prebiotic foods in, and you'll be doing yourself a huge favor. So to reiterate really quickly, because we tangented off of it, although I thought that was a good tangent. Let's talk a little bit about this. So basically, what you're saying is, as far as this glucuronidase thing, this beta-glucuronidase, which
Hmm.
is this, we'll say, I don't know, negative a chemical that is made inside the body that cleaves off the estrogen from the bile, prevents it from leaving the body, and gets it recycling. There's really, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Lisa, but my understanding is there's kind of two ways to really influence that. The first way, and probably the most foundational way, is get your gut microbiome right, right? And
Hmm.
then there's all the things you can do with that we've already talked about.
Hmm.
Fiber supplementation. I specifically am very fond of spore probiotics for that purpose, that kind of thing. And
Hmm.
then you can also directly impact it more in the short term, with calcium D-glucarate, sulforaphane, your cruciferous vegetables, those types of things. Those are going to work right now. The D-glucarate is
Right.
going to break down beta-glucuronidase right now while you're taking the time to build your gut back up, because that takes a little bit more time. And so it can be this kind of 1-2 punch thing, but you don't have to wait 3 months or 6 months to make this massive shift in your microbiome. There are things you can do right now that can make a big difference with that hormone metabolism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And starting on, if someone's ready, saying, you know what, I do want to start getting, like, I do feel like my hormones are just wacky and this is resonating with me. Yeah, just start right now. Like, next time you go to the grocery store, make sure you buy cruciferous vegetables so that most days or nights of the week you're having some sort of cruciferous vegetable. You're getting in those active ingredients and get some of those prebiotic fibers in. That's really helpful. And then if you're ready to consider supplementation, then let's talk about, the EndoCleanse, and let's talk about adding those spore-based probiotics in. Now your gut is like, yes, now we're rolling for
Yeah.
sure. Hmm.
Exactly. And of course, we always have to consider the liver itself. One of the things that's beautiful about broccoli sprouts, broccoli itself, sulforaphane, is it supports that phase two, liver detoxification, NERF2, that sort of thing. So making sure your liver pathways are open, making sure that
Mm-hmm.
you're regular in the bathroom is critical. And then doing all these other things that we've talked about, you can make a big dent, and you can make a big dent really, really quickly. It's actually pretty amazing, Lisa. Another cool thing about being me and talking to people about supplements all day long is I hear all these stories, right? Success stories, stuff that didn't go so well, whatever. We hear it all down here. And one of the things that's so cool is oftentimes when we help people with things like DIM and deglucarate and indo-3-carbinol and EndoCleanse, which contains all three, there are a lot of people that start feeling better like right away. And within just the first few days or a week, they'll start to see improvements. And women who are still experiencing a monthly cycle, I always tell them, that first cycle, we'll see if there's a real impact or not. But by the second cycle, you're going to see some real shifts. And I don't know, 95 times out of 100, that's exactly what we see. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't take months and months and months. You can really start to see improvement right away. Women who are experiencing hot flashes and night sweats and things like that, it's amazing how often I hear we throw EndoCleanse in there, we throw deglucarate in there. In the years past, we've had just DIM on its own, just indole-3-carbinol on its own, just deglucarate. We've had formulas, and some combination of those things, depending on the individual. In many cases, they're noticing a dramatic difference in just the first week or two, which is awesome because that's kind of more like what pharma promises, but we're doing it with
Mm.
natural things. And in the background, if you're doing what we're talking about, what Lisa's pushing here with the fiber and the probiotics and things like that, you're going to find that you're going to see a really nice, steady improvement as you go.
Yes. And so if you go the pharmaceutical route, we always keep in mind that there are side effects, right? There are side effects. Nothing works in a vacuum. But if you go this route, this holistic healing route, this functional root cause resolution route, there are side benefits. It's not just your hormones. When your gut starts to get better, your serotonin production improves, which helps mood stabilization. So it's
Yeah.
not just the estrogen, It's not just the gut improving. You start seeing inflammation come down, joint pain come down, some weight might start to come off. You'll start, maybe with the inflammation coming down, your face limbs, you start to look a little bit more vibrant. Like, all these other side benefits are part of the package as you're doing these few things that we're talking about, which is so exciting. You have people come in. I bet I used to see this when I had my clinic in Pennsylvania. People would come in after a month and literally, Jared, they look different. And I'd
Yeah.
be like, oh, you're feeling better, aren't you? I can see it physically
Hmm.
on your face. That's so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. And that's, I want to bring that up in terms of just the rapid improvement that you can see also, because I think that gives people a little bit more, I don't know, courage, a little more kick in the pants to get started on this thing, because you can see results, much more quickly. Now,
Yeah.
before we run out of time, because we only have about 10 minutes left,
Hmm.
you did mention before we started the show that you wanted to talk a little bit about thyroid and how it's impacted by the estrobolome and all of this stuff. The
Yeah.
gut thyroid axis. That's an interesting thing, because we hear about the gut brain axis, right? That's the one that everybody's familiar with. But the gut, as we discussed, plays a role everywhere.
Yeah.
So talk about thyroid, and because it's such a chronic issue in America, so many of us walking around with underperforming thyroids. How is it related to all of this?
This is fascinating. And before we wrap up, I do want to just touch on, it'll take a minute, on testosterone as well.
Sure.
But the thyroid piece, so when we talk about beta-glucuronidase back in the estrogen piece, that we kind of look at that, we all have some of that enzyme, but when it's overproduced, it becomes a bad guy, if we want to
Right.
simplify it that much, right? It kicks the estrogen off the garbage truck. Well, with our thyroid, the main production hormone that our thyroid makes is T4, right? The number 4. And then our body, 20% of that, our body converts that to T3. T3 is the spark plug. T3 is that active form. That's where we feel the effects of our thyroid. Our thyroid is maybe the only hormone, I might have that wrong, but it is a hormone, that thyroid hormone, that goes into every cell of the body. Every cell has thyroid receptors. So it's really important that we're good converters from T4. Think about it, that is the sleeping thyroid molecule, to
Hmm.
T3, the active, awake. That's the one that keeps our metabolism going, keeps us feeling really good, keeps us regular, keeps our skin from drying out, all those things. Well, there is an enzyme called deiodinase, and all that means is it knocks off. So T4 means there are 4 iodine molecules on that T,
Hmm.
and then T3 means there are 3. So deiodinase just knocks off a molecule and activates it. Very simplified version of what's happening, but gives us the point. When we have dysbiosis, the deiodinase underproduces. So our lab work may look good when it comes to T4. And what do our doctors typically test? They don't test everything for thyroid. They test TSH.
Right.
TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. Comes from the brain, goes to the thyroid and says, hey, there's not enough thyroid, make more, right? So when TSH goes up, that's the brain saying, hey, I'm sending you the signal, louder, 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 make more. So when it goes up higher, that means we're not producing enough. When it
Right.
goes down really low, it means the brain saying, cut it off. I have too much. So you want it in the sweet spot. But when all doctors typically look at is TSH, is it going too high or too low? Typically it's too high. If it's going too high, then we'll test the T4 and maybe the T3.
Yeah. Maybe.
Maybe. So
Maybe reverse T3, but not really, right?
the good ones, we'll test the reverse T3, and that tells us even more of a story.
Right.
But so say they test TSH, it looks pretty good. It's in range, at least in traditional medicine's
Yeah.
range. T4 looks good, but you feel terrible. Well, your T3 could be in the tank, and that's because your gut is not causing that activation of that hormone. Or you're, like you said, reverse T3. Now that's something else. That's related to stress. So as our cortisol goes high and our stress goes high, that increases that T4, then shunts over to reverse T3 as opposed to regular T3. Totally different, a little bit different of a cascade or conversation.
So
But
it's interesting because what you just described is basically the exact opposite of beta-glucuronidase.
hmm
So you have you have one enzyme that's produced too much
hmm
due to gut dysbiosis, which keeps the estrogen recycling in the body, and then you've got this other enzyme that's not enough that turns
hmm
T4 into T3. And so again, as it always is with, well, in human health as its entirety, but especially I think with hormones, it's just all about balance and finding balance with this. So then specifically, do you have recommendations besides what you've already made to optimize this T4 to T3 conversion?
I that's a great question. I don't typically have others. I go back to the root. Let's get to the root of getting that gut balance. Let's get the
Hmm.
microbiome balance. I think if someone did a deep dive and study, we could probably find out even more that we would add on. But the good news is if you start to address the dysbiosis, and then leaky gut is another piece of that, and inflammation, we want to bring down inflammation. That for sure is contributing. So if we can start bringing down inflammation, start repairing the gut, start bringing back balance in the microbiome, bring down inflammation. Now we're starting to get all of those pieces working together. And like I said, there's probably more we could do. We want to make sure the selenium, we want to make
Hmm.
sure certain minerals are high enough, like selenium, iron, zinc. We want to make sure those are high enough in the body because without it, again, the thyroid isn't functioning properly. But that's just those are small things. You have a multivitamin that's going to have those in it that is going to address that. You do
Yeah,
personally. I wouldn't say
right.
you don't go buy a Centrum or one a day. That's not.
No,
But you
no, no, no.
personally have one you've created that would
Yeah, the Ultimate Vitality Multi does cover a lot of those, micronutrient type things that play a major role in
Mhm.
that. And and we know again, just restating this, which is such an obvious thing as we start to think about this. It still starts in the gut. The gut has this axis with every other aspect of the body,
Yes.
and so the thyroid functions better in the presence of a strong um, gut biome, and so do the adrenals, the entire HPA axis. All of this is big. Okay, so we are very short on time. I know you've got somewhere
Yeah.
you've got to go. Tell us what you want to tell us about testosterone, and then we'll get this
Yes.
wrapped up.
There's so many more things we could talk about. I have so many
Yes.
more about hormones in the gut, but I just want to mention with testosterone. We talked mostly about estrogen today. When we have leaky gut is different than dysbiosis. So the 2 second differentiation, dysbiosis is what we talked about. The balance is off between the good guys and the bad guys. Leaky gut is when we have little pinpricks all through. Think about like a hose with little pinpricks all through
Mhm.
it. Now you turn it on, it's leaking. That's kind of what leaky gut is. It's not diffusing properly. Things are getting out before they're fully ready to get out into the bloodstream. So what happens then is we end up with something we have, the bad guys are endotoxins, meaning the bad guys that we talked about in the dysbiosis, some of those are gram negative bacteria. And on their surface, they have some toxins, which are called, it's all this fancy stuff called lipopolysaccharides. They're just, think of them as bad guys, like toxins on top of bad guys. And when we have leaky gut, those can come off into the bloodstream. That is one of the main causes when we see gut problems of chronic inflammation. We're trying all these
Mhm.
things to reduce inflammation, but what we don't realize is that it's coming through some dysbiosis paired with a leaky gut is causing that. So when that happens, we call that endotoxemia. It just means toxins from the inside, endo. When that happens, then we can increase another enzyme called aromatase. And aromatase takes our testosterone, men and women, but this is, you definitely see this in men, and it shifts it to estrogen. And
Mhm.
that's when we see men saying, I don't have the stamina I used to have. I feel like I'm losing muscle tone. I feel like I'm
Mhm.
getting puffy arms and man boobs. And now that again goes back to let's fix the dysbiosis, let's seal up the gut, heal that up. And then you can start to see. So it's not just testosterone replacement, not against that, but it's not just TRT. It's also let's look at the gut and make sure we're fixing basically the holes in the roof so that
Yeah.
what you're doing in addition is actually going to be effective.
100%. And I love, yeah, that's a really kind of good full circle moment here, because it all still boils down to, rebuilding the body, reestablishing normal function in the body, not necessarily the pharmaceutical route is what it is. It's
Hmm.
always, here's the symptom, whether that's low thyroid or low testosterone or low energy or high hot flashes or horrible periods or whatever it is. And here's the solution. Here's our symptom relievers, right? And so in the case of testosterone, it's TRT, or in the case of estrogen, maybe or progesterone, it's HRT, right?
Hmm.
Replacement. And you said it, I'll say it. I'm not necessarily opposed to those things, but I am opposed to those as first resort. And that's one of the big things that we're really trying to teach with our book and with our protocol is there are so many things that you can do short of these pharmaceutical measures to optimize what your body can do on its own. And then at that point, you can determine, well, do I also need to get some replacement going on? The
Hmm.
most likely scenario is if you do need to get more or do some hormone replacement or decide that you want to, you're going to need less of it, which is always good. Less pharma equals always good, right?
Yes.
And what you are doing will be more effective because the body is ready for it and knows how to receive those hormones, because the what's the word I'm looking for? The endocrine disrupting chemicals are not in the way, so the hormones are able to communicate and do all the things they're supposed to do. If the gut's
Right.
functioning like it should, everything works better. So just so many things you can do short of the pharmaceutical route, at least first, before you decide if maybe it makes sense to do something with bioidenticals.
Absolutely. Just start this, build the foundation for the first
Yes,
several months
yes,
and
yes.
start get a new baseline and then decide, okay, what do I need now? Maybe it is that and that's okay. But let's get that foundation nice and steady
Yeah.
first.
I love that. Build the baseline, right? Yeah, new
Mm-hmm.
baseline. Excellent.
Yeah,
Okay, Lisa, I know you've got to go and I don't want to take any more of your time, although I would love to have you back and talk more about this. It'd be a great time, I'm sure.
let's do it.
How can people learn more about what you're doing? Where do they go? And, give us all the places, and then we
Yeah.
will link all of these things in the show description as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my podcast is Pretty Well, the Pretty Well podcast. And that is in all the places you hear podcasts. And on Instagram, it's Pretty Well underscore podcast. And then my business is Lisa Smith Wellness, pretty easy. So it's lisasmithwellness.com. And in early 2026, actually toward the end of first quarter, I'm launching a 6-week online program that incorporates some of this stuff and just helps women saying, wait a minute, I'm in midlife. And I'm not quite sure who's looking at me in the mirror or what the heck is going on. It's called Brains and Beauty, and it's how to bring back cognition and, feel and look like yourself, but even better than ever going forward. So it's Brains and Beauty, your best chapter yet.
Love it. And I will say this because Lisa's not going to have time to say it or wouldn't say it herself, but she explained to me in a little bit more detail what that brains and beauty thing is going to look like. And it's exciting. You'll want to stay tuned for that. So definitely
Yeah.
link up with her on Instagram, give her a follow. As you can tell, she's a wealth of information and just a really well-meaning human being. And I'm excited to be able to call you my friend. I do a lot of podcasts. You do a lot of podcasts. And generally speaking, I have a great experience with everybody that interviews me, but there are certain ones that really click, and you've been one of those.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you were willing to take the time to come on Vitality Radio today. There will be an invitation for you down the road as well. So let's do this again.
It was my honor. I appreciate it. Thanks, Jared.
Awesome. And for everybody listening, thank you so much for your time listening to Vitality Radio. Of course, you know how much I appreciate you. Share this episode with anybody that you feel like it can help. We would love to build this audience and get as many people as healthy and vital as we can through education and empowerment through episodes like this one. If you have questions about anything you heard, call us 801-292-6662 or jump on our website, vitalitynutrition.com. Links for everything we discussed will be in the show description. Until next time, I'm Jared St. Clair, and this has been Vitality Radio.